community is going through now. We're in a very painful time. Something new wants to be born, and if we can experience that pain and confusion, labor is also very confusing. The period of labor that's called transition, do you remember that? People, that the end right before the baby's being born, you're very confused, you're very scared. If we can relax and understand that a big part of the fear and in the world right now, and the terrorism, is this rejection of change. So what do I think is being born? Well, about 50,000 years ago, our ancestors, the Cro-Magnon, took up inhabitants in caves in southern France and Spain, maybe around here, I don't know, but I visited those caves in the Dordogne area of France. Have any of you been there? Where you get to see on the walls of the cave the story of the organizing myth of that time that existed for 12,000 years. This myth, which was very different from the next human myth, the story we tell ourselves about reality. That myth was about the great goddess, about animals, about our symbiotic relationship with the earth. Then we moved into a different myth, which I call the myth of the conqueror, and it had some wonderful aspects to it. Like, for example, we don't have to be afraid when we got off the boat last night that a pack of woolly mammoths would eat half of us. Like, the myth of the conqueror enabled humans to create amazing things, advances in science and medicine and cities, and we divided and conquered. But I think what's being born now is this new myth. We have outlived the myth of the conqueror, which really did utilize the male in us, the male sense to go out and take and conquer and create on that linear way that the left brain does. And the new myth that's arising is a more female one, a more feminine one. I don't mean women will now rule the world, which actually might be a good thing, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is that the feminine values, which I do believe there are, and that doesn't mean all women have them and all men don't. For example, look at some of the female leaders who are in our world now, especially in the United States. What went on this year with Hillary Clinton and now Sarah Palin. Certainly, I don't mean that just because you have a vagina, you're going to lead with female qualities. What I'm talking about is changing the whole story of what it means to lead and to be powerful. That instead of only using one of our intelligences, the logical left brain intelligence, to start to activate our emotional intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, which is about a less egoful way of perceiving reality, emotional intelligence, the capacity to love and know each other and to go into the world of the other. These to me are feminine qualities, and I feel them wanting to be born in the world, and it's our responsibility, men and women both, to elevate and dignify and give virility to the qualities of the feminine so that they become the guiding ethos of our world.
I wanted to follow up on a couple of different points you made because I think it's worth adding some underlining. I know you make the point that Hillary Clinton may not be the role model for a leader that you personally are attracted to, and probably not Sarah Palin either in the case of the United States. But I also know that you've said in other places that there's something, again, confusing about a situation where it may be that Barack Obama is the feminine principle in the American presidential election. And that may be a little bit disconcerting to think about the male in the race being more of a feminine principle. It may be hard to, because we think about gender and we think about sex, but we don't necessarily think about the feminine and the masculine. So could you just drill down a little bit deeper on what the distinctions are that you're trying to make there?
I'll try, because it's very confusing and it's very dangerous territory. And having been a feminist and involved in the women's movement in the United States for my whole life, I know that this has been a very confusing time to be someone interested in women and leadership in the United States. And so you're all really interested in the United States politics? I still think that it's really important to get women, no matter who they are, into positions of leadership. I still believe that, even though I believe that in this case, I do believe Barack Obama is holding more of the feminine. Because many women all over the world, in order to assume positions of power in a male-dominated power structure, in the old myth of the conqueror, there's been no other way to get there but to take on attributes of the dominating myth. And as we've been learning from Bruce and Rupert and other of the scientists here, environment can change one's entire biology. And I do believe that women who choose to be leaders in a male-dominated system begin to take on those qualities. It's completely understandable. So I, in my own personal decision to support Barack Obama and to work for him in American politics, because I'm very involved in that, it really has been difficult for me, because I love Hillary Clinton and I love what she's done and I support her. But really I had to come down on the side of who is holding the new story for humanity, which to me is the feminine principle, which involves caretaking over conquering, listening as much as speaking, nurturing as much as creating. And what we talked about last year when Isabel Allende was here, we talked about this word mamismo, which is the opposite of machismo. Mamisma is the great, fierce mother protector energy who wants to restore instead of conquer. And I do think that is what the feminine is. And I see that in Barack Obama. He sees a world that needs to talk to each other, and he's responding to that.
One more follow-up. I know you feel something emerging. Do you see places where there's evidence of this kind of change? Are there, in your travel, in your own work, are you running into places where, since we want to see the pattern ourselves, we can learn to look for it and have that sensing mechanism?
I certainly do.
We see it here when dialogue happens rather than debate. When debate happens, it's adversarial. It's one person in competition with the other. Now, within the framework of say, Jungian analysis, or the idea that we hold opposites, that in each of us there is masculine and feminine. There is competitive and caretaking. And how to hold in a vessel that is this dialogue, or in ourselves, or in a relationship. How do you listen to each other and not have one dominating or not be adversarial? That's a very simple kind of thing, that every single relationship we're in is either a dominator model where one person's opinions and wishes and needs is more important than the other, which is the model of narcissism and codependency, or you're in a circle of two in which one might have a leader position in one thing or another, but the needs, the concerns, the dreams of each are equally important, and you listen. And each person in a circle matters. So then we have this beautiful image of Mother Earth, and it's a circle, it's a mandala, which is an image of the self or wholeness. And the idea that one country should dominate the rest is a model also of narcissism and codependency. And so this image, which is out of balance, it's a dominator, conqueror, warrior model, is the model that we have been proceeding under. And I was thinking about also the delivery situation, because in getting my MD, I love delivering babies as an intern. And there is a magic at being present when through all that labor and all that mess, a new life comes in and you're privileged to witness it. Well, it is the archetype of the midwife, that midwife's new life coming in, and midwife's the soul as it goes out, and it's holy or sacred work. Now, when I was pregnant and in labor and delivery, I found it was really different than when I was on the other doctor end. It really was. I knew the stages of delivery from the doctor's side, and I delivered over 100 babies. And now I was a pregnant woman on the table, and this baby was coming out in me, and in that transition time, it can't be resisted. You can try, but it is coming through, and this is when the baby and the mother are in danger. You go under the pubic bone into the world, or not. And if the labor is halted, if there's a cord around the baby's neck, if there are these times when there is danger about will the mother and will the baby survive. Now, one of the things that I experienced in that moment was transpersonal. Up until that point, I had been spiritually oriented to divinity as transcendent. It had affected me and brought me into medicine as a healer. But now I was experiencing something that was in the body. And in the body, I had this experience of knowing that it didn't matter that I was a doctor or that I was important or that I had any of the above. I was having the experience that every woman through time had ever had who gave birth to a baby. And that is what recruited me into the women's movement, because I had not felt ever discriminated against as a woman, and I was somebody already in the world when I was doing this, and my first impression was, this is hard, this is painful, this is what women have been doing forever without acknowledgement. And that sense of sisterhood grew out from in the body sisterhood was what recruited me into the women's movement. It also was something I reflected back on when I went on pilgrimage for the first time and went into Chartres Cathedral, which I did just prior, again, for the second time, prior to this meeting, and felt the energy of the place in my body, because I've always experienced spirituality as sort of being of the spirit. And to experience that it is an in-the-body experience as well. And when it is an in-the-body experience, you could say it is of the feminine. It is a feminine aspect of divinity, as transcendent in spirit is the masculine aspect of divinity. And this is how the feminine divinity, sacred dimension is brought into the world. It's brought through one's personal experience, not through one's writing or meditation or anything. It's that you live it out. And when I went on pilgrimage and realized that there was a sacred dimension that was of the goddess, and that this is what had been cut out of culture, this dimension of physicality, of sexuality, of sensuality, this was what was missing in the culture. And it was holy and sacred, while the religions just had hierarchy, and that grace came through the sacraments. Well, grace is around in the physical world, and that is the feminine aspect of divinity, and why it matters that the goddess, in her many aspects, was suppressed and put into the underground, underworld, collective unconscious, is that the dominator hierarchical warrior ethic is based upon the warrior god, is based upon war gods and transcendent gods. And without goddess femininity, spirituality coming up and in balance, women and the feminine principle in men and women will not be held in equal balance. And I see that emerging in the culture. I see that there's a grassroots women's spirituality movement. So much of what women do is not seen. I also see a movement of circles of women emerging. Something is coming up, and it's green and vulnerable. And one of the metaphors was that the highest of masculine principle were involved in the teamwork and the brilliance and the scientific breakthroughs that led to the Apollo missions that provided that view of Mother from outer space. And so it took the masculine in its finest way of looking at things and doing things to take that picture of wholeness of Mother, and it became, for those who are moved by beauty, an icon. You were moved by the beauty of the earth from outer space, that there is Mother, and it's all we got. She birthed us. Everything, just as we come out of the body of a woman, we breathe her, the earth. We eat her, we drink her, much as we are in like a womb space just by being human beings on this earth. And inside the body, the placenta feeds the baby, breathes the baby, nourishes the baby. But as human beings who walk on this earth, the air, the water, the earth sustains us, grows food for us. We are in this position where we are the people that have grown from being in relationship to our Mother Earth as we psychologically are to our mothers. So much time is therapist counts complaining about Mother as she relates to you. Did she do what you wanted her to do? You think of Mother in relationship to your own needs that were met or unmet. When you get to be an adult, you see your own real Mother as a person. And you see your vulnerabilities, and now you are an adult who is in relationship with your biological mother. If at 65 you're still complaining about your mother, then you haven't grown into a relationship with her as a person, and you don't have the emotional intelligence yet to have compassion for how it was she did or didn't do what she did or didn't do. Because we don't encourage, especially men in this culture, to develop the capacity for empathy. Women as a gender, not every woman, but women as a gender are considered the empathic gender, while men as a gender are seen as the more of the mind. They can systematize, they can see how pieces work together. But the ability to imagine yourself as somebody in someone else's shoes, that's empathy, which women as a gender do have a greater gift for. But it's not related, obviously, to women.
Jean, I wanted to ask you a question. You briefly touched on the concept of circle. And I suspect there's a lot more there going on in your life, and also in the significance of the shape of the circle, what the symbolism of the circle really suggests. Could you, again, talk a little bit more about what you see as the significance of circles, how you understand them, where the kind of message of the circle comes from?
Well, the circle, for one thing, if you're all sitting at tables, and if you faced each other and not us, you'd see each other's faces. If each person in that now circle mattered, every voice would be heard, and you'd hear who they are. And if you stayed in relationship with each other in this circle, and you began to trust each other with what is vulnerable in you, what you care about, what you dream about, where your pain is, then this would be an amazing vehicle for you to deepen psychologically and spiritually, and to learn and grow the empathic part of your own psyche, which is the feminine side of the psyche. And it is also an organizing unit that is amazing. This is the only thing that brought the first two waves of the women's movement to change the world in the United States for women and bring women's equal rights first, the vote. It was women working together in groups over time that brought about the 19th Amendment in 1920 so that women in America, for the first time, had the right to vote. And because women worked towards that and talked to so many people, over time, the resistance shifted and the idea was accepted, and when it passed, all resistance was gone. Haven't women always voted? This is what happens when a critical mass, when a critical number of people accept something that was resisted. In the last 2 years, we saw it happen. Global warming has been advocated for a long time by many scientific minds and many activists and ecological people. And the other folks said, not real, hysteria, etc., etc. Something shifted. Yes, and Gore had something to do with being part of that tipping point, but all of a sudden, global warming is accepted. That green is the new thing. This is what happens when an idea becomes part of culture. It just becomes like what we now believe in. So we saw it first with women in groups bringing about the right to vote, and then many of us here were around in the 60s and 70s when it was just women meeting in groups called consciousness-raising groups. Again, it was an image of a circle, telling the truth of their own lives, and then supporting each other to do whatever it is that they could do. And what happened at the grassroots level was that things moved. First in relationship, mostly women went home and talked to their significant other about let's be equal, and most of the time it worked, and sometimes it worked not at all. And then, but it had to do with women in groups. The image of women together working, often below the radar, which is happening now. So that women's spirituality is about meeting in groups. And meeting in groups with a spiritual center would be to acknowledge that in the center of us as a psyche, in the center of the circle that has a sacred center, there is wisdom, compassion, and courage that can be drawn on. And it's like sitting around either the fire that was the ancient Greek goddess Hestia. She was goddess of the hearth and temple, and she was considered present in the fire itself. And what is fire but the source of warmth and illumination or compassion? The other place where the image of goddess was felt was around sacred wells. And it dips down into the aquifer and brings up fluidity in life. And so the image of the circle, or the circle that you meet around a campfire, you are together, you're not hierarchical. And so the first thing is experiencing it, and then growing through it and being part of it. And women have a natural gift for this, because when women are stressed, as the UCLA research in 1991 showed, up until that point, it was assumed that men and women always reacted to stress in the same way. It was supposed to be an adrenaline response, flight or fight. When women started to be researchers, they noticed that when their department came under stress, that the men behaved that way. Flight or fight was the energy, and mostly it got into flight, which is to retire into their own space with the message, leave me alone. And maybe the fight part was the rage on the freeway. But what did women do? They drank coffee, they cleaned the lab, and they talked to each other. And out of it came the work that on hormones and reactions, and it's called the tend and befriend reaction. When women are stressed, what do? They talk to others they trust. And what happens? The stress level goes down, and oxytocin, the maternal bonding hormone, goes up, and it's enhanced by estrogen. So physiologically, women are in a better position to respond to, say, stress of conflict through dialogue, through talk. And what men as a gender do, and this is the need for, defending against the woolly mammoths, is that adrenaline goes up and it's enhanced by testosterone. So to bring balance, you've got to have more oxytocin in the room.
Elizabeth, I want to come back to you, and then if we can get some microphones in the room. I know there are people who have comments to give the question to. What kind of work are you doing or do you see happening that is change making? What can people plug into? What can they do? What kinds of practices begin to make a difference to bring this balance and change the conversation?
Well, my primary work in the world is spiritual work, on myself, and I'm one of the founders of an organization called Omega Institute, which is like Waldzell in the United States. We're 31 years old, the organization is, and we have about 30,000 people come through our doors every year for conferences a lot like this on a large variety of subjects, everything from science and spirituality to medicine and sports and art. What was the question? I lost my way. How can we? Oh, okay.
I'm interested in
applied.
change.
So even though that's, I do a lot of work on a big scale, to me the most important work each one of us can do is in our own homes. That's to me where it starts, and it's the most important work. It's really fun and exciting and meaningful and educational to talk about it in groups like this. But I've been so privileged over the years to be with some of the greatest minds of our time, the greatest spiritual teachers. And in the beginning of my work, I was so disillusioned because so many of the people who spoke about these high, noble ideas were really jerks in their everyday life. They were mean to their mates, they weren't good parents, and they didn't know how to look you in the eye when they talked, even though they were getting up on the stage and giving all these lofty ideas. And I'm so interested in how we do it for real in everyday life. So if we're talking about bringing the feminine out into the world, these principles of caring, listening, not conquering, but sharing this limited resources of the earth, I'm really interested in how we do it in everyday life. How do I help evoke in my husband his feminine? How do I let him help me become a more balanced in my masculine? If I can't carry it out in my marriage, I really have no right to stand up here and lecture other people. So my biggest work is how I walk my talk. And I think that is something that's very precious to the feminine because we've had so much experience with raising children. My experience of being a mother and being like housebound, it was torture for me because I have very strong masculine, but it really ground me down into the importance of raising these 3 little boys well. Like if that could be my only gift, that would be better than this huge institution I've created or the books I write. So I would say that the first place to start is in our own homes and in our own lives and in our relationships. So that's one big practice. Another practice to me is spiritual practice because working on the rough edges of my ego through the practice of meditation and other forms of spirituality is really important. It makes my business work better. It makes the way I am in meetings more effective and allows me to balance within myself my own masculine and feminine.
Could you give us some thoughts from your practice?
My practice is twofold. One, I